ABV is proudly sponsored by Convoy, Bintani, Craft Punks Canning and Rallings, labels and stickers.
Mate, thanks for coming to the podcast. How you going?
No worries. Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. I've been talking about this for a little while.
I have been. Yeah.
Good to make it on.
Mate, for sure. So, for those who don't know, you're Matty Cuthbert. You've just recently left Revel Brewing up here in Brisbane, and you're literally in the process of moving. You've started your job already.
Yeah.
Where are you going? What are you doing?
Oh, there's been a bit happening, mate. Yeah, as you said, I finished up at Revel about a month ago.
Yeah.
Just after the Queensland Beer Awards. After 7 odd years.
Yeah.
So it was a decent stint.
100%. Yeah.
So at that time, sort of made a few friends up here.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
In the brewing world, which has been really good. But I'm jumping over to work for Clayton Hops.
Nice.
So they are a hop grower out of New Zealand. Yeah, so a bit of a change of role.
Yeah.
Obviously still in the beer industry.
Yeah.
But
You
now
can't
I'm
just
out
give
and
it
about.
away that easy.
No. I've been brewing for a long time, so a bit of a change of pace.
Yeah.
And I guess a sidestep.
What's been your history of brewing? Because you and I have a mutual friend in Hendo, where I've seen some photos of, is it either Hendo in the nude in a mash tun, or you in a nude in a mash tun, or...
That photo has been around forever.
Yeah.
Actually doing some work and digging out the mash tun.
Yeah, we won't put that on. No one needs to see that again.
If you do need it, though, I do have it. My history, mate, I've been brewing for most of my adult life.
Yeah.
So I started in the early 2000s. So I went to Ballarat University.
Yep.
I was one of the first two ever to graduate from that course.
Yeah, right.
Back in 2004 or 5, I think it was, under the great Pete Aldred, who many brewers have studied under now. So back then it was a business degree with brewing as the major.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So at the time, I basically did it straight out of high school.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was a young fellow, I actually thought I wanted to be a teacher initially.
Yeah, okay.
So I applied for a couple of teaching courses as well.
Yeah.
And then sort of had brewing half as a joke.
Yeah.
And I didn't get the score that I was predicting with my year 12. So I didn't quite get into I did get into teaching, but not the course I wanted.
Yeah.
And then got into the brewing course. Went up to Ballarat Uni at the time I was in Geelong. Went and sussed out the brewing course. I'm like, wow, this looks a lot more interesting than being a teacher.
Yeah.
Hang around with little children.
Yeah.
I can hang around with big children drinking beers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
was beer always a focus? Like, did you enjoy beer? Did you like beer?
I was an 18-year-old kid, so you do. But at the time, you're really only drinking whatever the mainstream beer is.
Yeah.
And not really drinking it for the flavour and all that sort of thing.
Yep.
Buying whatever's the cheapest.
Yeah.
At the bottle shop and down the pub. But yeah, at that age, it was definitely an eye-opener.
Yeah.
At the time, there was nowhere near the breweries that are around now.
Yeah.
Craft beer in Australia was still very much a sort of almost a novel thing, I'd say. Some of the bigger ones we know now were around, like the more established, like Matilda Bay.
Yep.
They would have been bought out by then. At that time, it was where Little Creatures was still independent.
Yeah. Wow.
So I remember going to parties and stuff, and anyone that drank Little Creatures was a bit fancy.
Yeah.
Little Creatures Pale.
Yeah.
Some of those real early sort of establishment breweries were around there. I think Holgate in Victoria, they've been around that long.
Yeah.
Some of those, Nail in Western Australia, I think they just had their 25th birthday, so. But there was nowhere near the amount. So
yeah.
I remember people saying to me, "Oh, but you're doing brewing. That's an interesting choice."
Yeah.
And I always thought,
what were the career prospects?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Ended up working at like CB or something like that.
Yeah.
But then finishing the course, having a look for brewing jobs, there was actually a brewery in Geelong.
Yeah.
So where I was living, I'd travel up and down, back and forward to Ballarat to go to uni.
Yeah.
But based in Geelong as a young fella. By then I was probably 21, 22. The Geelong Brewery it used to be called.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, which is out in Mooreback in Geelong, so sort of overlooking the salt pans at the bottom of Geelong. Ended up they were looking for a brewer, so it worked out perfect.
Yeah.
So started in there. And compared to a modern brewery, that was quite an experience.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so you sort of have to have seen that brewery to actually appreciate what it was like.
Yeah.
An old German guy had cobbled it together, had of old tanks he'd pilfered from, I think, out of CB. They used to have a kegging plant down in Geelong.
Yep.
So there's these big square 200 hectolitre, they were storage tanks for kegging.
Yeah.
So he got those and sort of bricked them in to make them structurally sound because they weren't pressure vessels.
Yeah, okay.
So they were the fermenters. And it had it was just in a cold room, so it ran at You used to turn it on and off when you're doing a brew.
Right.
Or doing a fermentation to maintain the temperature.
Yeah, okay.
So not like a modern tank where you can actually control the temperature.
Yeah. There's no glycol for control.
Back then we were mostly brewing lager, so it was like lager at 17, 18 degrees.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, which it's interesting. I was talking to Hendo a couple of weeks ago, and that's what we're fermenting lager at now again.
Yeah. I think I was listening to, on his podcast, you and him talk about lager on the Quality Focus Pro Brewers, on his lager episode with you. And yeah, you were talking about that on there. Is that one of the learnings that you've sort of taken from all these different experiences that you've had?
That's sort of gone full circle. Yeah, like at the time, that's just what the brewery was doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of the mainstream lager is fermented that warm.
Yep.
With their house strain, whether it's actually a lager or an ale strain.
Yep.
Ferments really quickly, and particularly with Australian lager. It's why you sort of get the banana.
Yep.
So it just comes from that faster, warmer fermentation.
Yep.
Which is sort of like, you think of all the sort of big mainstream lagers.
Yeah.
Love that Australian flavour.
Yep.
But yeah, spent 7 or 8 years working in there. Just thinking back, we used to actually physically get in those tanks to clean them.
Yeah.
So OH&S back in those days. So you'd pull a beer out, you'd punch it down to the storage cellar, which was just another big cold room with more of those same tanks.
Yeah, okay.
Where it'd sit for a couple of weeks to mature. It's crazy. But yeah, literally get in the tanks to clean it out.
Yeah.
So to cool it, it actually had a coil that ran through the middle of the tank, an internal coil. And often that'd run at freezing temp.
Yeah.
So you'd end up forming ice on the coil.
Yeah.
So you'd get in there and like chip the ice off the coil, be in like full wet weather gear with the miner's torch on.
Yep.
Put a little CO2 meter in there to make sure you could actually breathe.
Yeah.
You're in a confined space in the dark cleaning out these tanks with caustic up the top.
Yep.
Yeah.
Far out.
That's how I learned to brew. So now when I see a modern brewer complaining that it's hard, I think,
you don't know
how easy you've got it. But yeah, that was took me to about 2012, which is where I met Hendo.
Yep.
So he came in about the last 6 months I was there.
Yep.
He was working at another brewery down in the Otways.
Yeah.
And he came in as the head brewer. I think I was running production or something at the time.
Yep.
Yeah. So I spent about 6 months working with Hendo, and then I actually went travelling for a while.
Yeah, okay.
Went to Europe travelling for 6 months.
Yep.
But yeah, since then, Hendo and I have kept in touch and obviously know each other pretty well.
Yeah.
Been mates over the years.
Yep.
But yeah, when I got back, I worked in a glass factory for a little while, just with another mate.
Yeah.
After travelling, needed to make some money to pay back some of the
travel. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then I got offered another job. It was more of a craft beer bar than a brewery.
Yeah.
He always said he was going to start a brewery. That was called Odyssey Tavern.
Yeah.
So this is in about 2013. So I basically used to run this craft beer bar, or work in the craft beer bar.
Yep.
Emma, my wife, actually ran it.
Yeah, okay.
And then we were contract brewing. So we made a beer called Calypso Pale Ale, which was an American pale.
Yep.
We made that at a few local breweries, which is always really popular. We made 2 or 3 different beers.
Yeah.
I spent a year there. And then I'm like, I want to get back into brewing properly.
Yeah.
So started looking around. And at the time, the Sydney beer scene was starting to kick off.
Yep.
So around sort of the inner west, Newtown, Marrickville, that sort of area. Back then, Young Henry's was still pretty new.
Yeah, okay.
So I think they'd been brewing for 1 or 2 years. So I went for a job at Young Henry's and I went for a job at Rocks at about the same time.
Yeah.
Richard Adamson from Young Henry's and Scotty Morgan from Rocks are brother-in-laws.
Yeah, okay.
So they both, I don't know if they went to the States or what they did, but they both bought the same brewery.
Yep.
So still, it's quite an sort of technologically advanced brew house.
Yeah.
It's a little 20 hectoliter mash filter.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so I'd never seen anything like that. There's not many of them in Australia.
Yeah.
I think Young Henry's bought 3 or 4. Yeah, but anyway, so I'm like, this is pretty cool.
Mm.
So I didn't get the job at Young Henry's, but I got the one at Rocks. So Emma and I moved up to Sydney about 2014.
Yeah.
We packed up my little Suzuki Swift with all our belongings, straight up the highway. Spent a bit of time. I spent about 2 weeks living in a pub in Redfern that Rocks had just taken over.
Yep.
But that turned out to be a bit rough.
Yeah.
We had to get out of there. Went and stayed with a mate through footy for a little while until
Emma was like, I can't live here much longer, man.
Yeah, pretty much. We ended up in Marrickville. So we lived in Marrickville for about 4 years.
Yep.
And during that time, the inner west sort of took off.
Yeah.
So the breweries now that are sort of established in the inner west, like Wayward, Batch, Grifter, what else is there? Filter.
Yep.
They were all sort of taking off in that time.
Yep.
So it was sort of a cool time to be there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Willie the Boatman, that was another one.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So
we're hoping to get down. Joel and I are hoping to do a trip down this year as our road trip down to Marrickville as our road trip. So yeah,
there's a lot of cool breweries there.
There's just a few. Yeah.
So that was 2014 to about 2017 or something in that period.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marrickville's a really sort of cool place to live.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really good food. It's got like a lot of Vietnamese influence. So we used to go and eat pho. Every Sunday.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Bit of health food.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
They're good for after drinking.
Yeah. There's there's Greeks there as well. So they're like really good sort of Greek food.
Yeah, nice.
So very multicultural and interesting culture.
Yep.
And then all the breweries mixed in as well. So that was really cool. And then we sort of decided we wanted to get out of Sydney. Emma was teaching and Brox at the time was going through an interesting period, got put for sale. And then a lot of the good people who started it started leaving and doing different things.
Yep.
So sort of started looking for the next thing.
Yep.
And here in Brisbane, we're sort of going through or starting to go through probably what the Inner West went through 4 or 5 years earlier.
Yeah.
Where all the breweries here were starting to open. So at the time, I went for the job at Helios, at Revel, which was malt brewing, and one up in Noosa, which I can't remember the name of. And I got all 3 jobs. So I ended up having to choose which one, and ended up choosing Revel. It was more the location.
Yep.
Because he wanted to live sort of central.
Yeah, okay.
I ended up living in Newstead.
Yep.
And then obviously Revel sort of has done what it's done. We spent about, 2 years brewing out of that little brew house over in Oxford Street.
Yeah.
Then COVID hit, as we know. But in the meantime, we'd found the site up at Rivermakers.
Yep.
Yeah. So that sort of fast-tracked Revel's plans a little bit.
Yeah.
There was always plans to do something a bit bigger.
Yep.
And we were growing out Oxford Street.
Yeah.
Outgrowing Oxford Street.
Took a while to get into Rivermakers.
Yeah, it did. So that took a little while because COVID. It took a bit longer for the brew to get over.
Yeah.
Took longer for that site to sort of develop. So a few hiccups with the council on that, as happens when you start brews.
Yep.
But moved into Rivermakers during the end of 2020. And we commissioned that brewery in about August.
Yep.
2020.
Right
in the middle of COVID. So normally when you buy a brewery, they come and help you commission it.
Yeah. No one could get in the country.
Yeah, it was an American company, but obviously it got made in China like everything else. And normally the Americans will go to the Chinese factory and put it all together and make sure it all works.
Yeah.
They couldn't do that either.
Yeah, okay.
So it got to us in containers and myself and Flex.
Like a big IKEA kit.
Pretty much, massive Meccano.
Yeah.
We sort of put it all in place, and a lot of the pipes and stuff didn't match up.
Oh, no.
It had like the wrong struts on the brew house at the pump sat. There's all these other little bits that didn't quite match.
Yeah.
Because they hadn't been there to fix it all. So we had to get a welder in and put it all back together.
Do some work.
And actually we had like this little schematic trying to work out where the pipes were. It was literally like a big Meccano.
Yeah.
But
was there anything during that stage where you're putting together that you were like, actually, this would be better if we run it this way, and you changed a couple of things?
We did
because it's in
situ,
things, right?
But having brewed on it now for 4 or 5 years, in hindsight, there's heaps of other things I would have modified. Yeah. But that always happens when you get a brew house.
That's right, yeah.
But during that time, we're brewing out of Oxford Street in COVID, trying to put this new brewery together.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on.
Yeah. And, Revel grew quite well.
Yeah. It's, like everyone, it's sort of had its ups and downs.
Yeah.
In the industry, as we know, it's been going through a bit of turmoil.
Oh, yeah.
It's surviving. It's just been bought over Christmas by new owners.
Yep.
So Jay and Co, the original owners, sold it at Christmas time. It's been taken on by a hospitality group.
Yep.
They sort of moved into that site and actually really opened up that site now.
Yeah,
which is really good.
Yeah, nice. Which is probably what it needed.
Yeah, a lot of potential.
Yeah.
A couple of false starts, but they've come in there and activated it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And Becky's there now, who was the Little Miss Sunshine.
Yeah, that's right. Becky's there, and I think Pedro's doing some work there.
Yeah, I think she told me that as well.
Yeah, so that's good.
Yeah,
onwards
nice.
and upwards for those guys.
Yeah. And so did you leave because they sold, or that was always on the cards, you were looking for something
to get
off the tools a bit?
The main reason we sort of left, we had another baby in the middle of last year.
Yep.
and just we're going home to be a bit closer to the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, because both sides of our family are down in Victoria.
Yep, okay.
Where we're from.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to have a little bit of help from the grandparents.
And then visit as well, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, kids want to see the family as well.
Yeah, we probably see our parents probably 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not much, and might see them for a weekend, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So to sort of have the family around. My brother's down there, Emma's sister's down there.
Yeah.
So more cousins.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really it's a family decision. And then the role with Clayton Hops was sort of in the works at the end of last year.
Yep.
I went over to New Zealand roughly this time of year last year, and toured around the hop growing region just out of Nelson.
Yep.
And went out to the Clayton Hops farms and to the processing facility.
Yep.
While I was there, and I was just very impressed with what they were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've just sort of gone all out
Yep.
in terms of what they're doing and innovating. So
Yeah.
it's a cool place over there. So Nelson is sort of the town that everyone sort of hangs out. And then out in the Tasman area, which is sort of northwest of the South Island.
Yeah.
Where most of the hops grow. Yeah.
So what are you doing for them? Are you sales? Are you
I've taken over
horticulturally? Are you?
No, not all the horticulture, all the growing, everything is done in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So that's all managed. There's 3 brothers, so between them they own 4 farms. So one brother owns 2, one brother owns another 2.
Yep.
And then the older brother Brian is the CEO, sort of pulls it all together and runs it.
Yep.
So my job is to come on as Australian sales.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so permanently in Australia.
Yep.
Going around talking to brewers.
Yeah.
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 And getting the hops out there so that more Australian brewers sort of see what we're doing.
Yeah.
Get to play around with these new sort of products that in the Southern Hemisphere aren't being done by anyone else.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was on our other podcast that we do with Phil from Hiker, where we are now, we're at our East Brisbane venue. We were talking just recently about, we found an article where New Zealand hops, they only domestically use about 15%. 85% are exported around the world, and they're winning a lot of contracts at the moment in the European. Just because they're organic capabilities, and the US can't compete. Is that similar to Australia? Like, do New Zealand hops have that much issue coming into Australia, or it's not that at all? Like, hops can be sold everywhere. It's just getting them to the brewers and getting brewers experienced with them. Yeah,
well, New Zealand is a bit different the way it's run than Australia, for example. I guess everyone knows New Zealand hops. So they are a co-op of growers. So I think 28 different hop growers sit under that.
Yeah, okay.
And basically, they grow the hops. As part of the agreement, they give them to New Zealand Hops who palletise them.
Yep.
And then they get distributed as a New Zealand Hops product.
Yeah, okay.
So in Australia, it's done by Bintani. Around the world, it's by different people.
Yep.
And then outside of that, there's now, whether you call them indie hop farms or growers that sit outside of the co-op, starting to pop up, and they can go direct.
Yeah, okay.
Which is what Clayton Hops are doing. There's a couple other ones as well, like Freestyle.
Yeah.
And a couple of smaller ones.
Yeah.
The main reason they can do that and why it hasn't happened to that degree in Australia is the main hop varieties in New Zealand have come off sort of the patent or trademark.
Yep.
Or the plant rights.
Yep.
So I think in New Zealand they lasted for 21 years.
Yeah, okay.
So over in New Zealand there's a government-run body called Plant and Food. So they basically develop the crosses and all the different hop varieties.
Yep.
They do other things as well, like kiwi fruits, apples.
Yep.
But the main sort of ones like Rewaka, Nelson Sullivan, Motueka that everyone knows.
Yeah. Yep.
They were developed by a hop scientist, Dr. Ron.
Yeah. Yep.
So up until I think it was 6-7 years ago, they were owned basically by New Zealand Hops.
Yeah. Okay.
The rights to the names of those hops, so no one else could really grow them.
Yep.
But now that has come off, so that's why these other farms are sort of popping up and starting to grow. And looking to do it in, I guess, different, more innovative ways.
Yep.
Than what New Zealand hops have sort of previously done in the past. That's not to slander anything they've done because they still do a great job. Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, that's sort of the reason it's popped up in New Zealand. Whereas in Australia, it's a little bit different. Like HBA is the main sort of hop company or hop grower in Australia.
Yep.
There is a couple of independent farms like Adsy and Ryefield and that.
Yeah.
They're nowhere near the sort of acreage as HBA.
Yeah. Yep.
Again, HBA own sort of all those proprietary brands like Galaxy, Enigma,
Yep.
Eclipse, all that sort of stuff. So I don't know in Australia how long that lasts for.
Yeah, yeah.
And I doubt HBA would be willing to give that to us,
Yeah.
particularly Galaxy, because that's sort of elevated them to where they are now around the world.
Yep.
So in Australia, the growers like Aussie and Ryefield and such, they can grow the publicly available hops, like
Yep.
American varieties like Cascade, Centennial, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then if they've got their own breeding program, they can develop their own hops.
Yep.
So I think Aussie have a couple, Melba, maybe something else. So they can do that.
Yep.
As sort of a side to what HBA are doing.
Yeah.
But then HBA is actually owned by Bath Haas.
Okay.
Which is one of the main sort of hop companies in the world, if
Yep.
not the biggest, I think.
Yeah.
So it's it's just a little bit different structure here to what it is in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Which is probably why you're seeing what New Zealand is doing.
Yep.
So it is a bit. I guess in a way they have a little bit more freedom with those sort of hops coming up to sort of express themselves and do different things. With the hops.
Yep.
Yeah.
Have you got a favourite NZ hop?
Probably my all-time favourite has always been Nelson Sylvan.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a hop I've brewed with for years.
Just because it's so flexible, hey?
Yeah,
across
and
a few
the way
different.
it presents itself. Yeah, you can use it in a lager, you can use it in a pale ale, IPA, whatever. And it's just got those really sort of nice flavours. And at times, if you use a heap, it's sort of that dank diesely flavour that some people like. It's a bit polarising for brewers and for drinkers, but I've always loved it.
Yep.
The Nelson this year that we're bringing over is really fruit forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's got some of those flavours like the gooseberry and sort of more of those wine flavours that it was originally. Yeah.
Do you are you going to get to brew still, like bringing some hops in and doing some collabs or some new product release with some brewers? Or
I was up at Moffat Beach last week, so we're doing a collab up there in May.
Yeah, cool.
He's brewing a New Zealand IPA that's going to go into the New Zealand IPA Cup.
Oh, nice.
That they hold down in Queenstown each year. Yeah, so he's going to be the first Australian brewer to brew a beer for that.
Nice.
But that's part of what I'll be doing as business development.
Yep.
Going around to breweries, doing collabs, so you can showcase the hops.
Yep.
And if a brewery hasn't, like Matt's never used Kiwi hops before.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So for someone like him to sort of see what the Kiwi, obviously he's a good brewer.
He's got a few accolades.
See what the Kiwi hops are like and how he might be able to sort of integrate those into some of his recipes and that sort of thing. Yeah. So that sort of stuff is big in what I'll be doing. Yeah. And then hopefully once I sort of get a bit more established, is set up like a little trial brewery either at home or in a space. Yeah. Just so you can knock out maybe 100 litres, play around with the different hops.
Show people what you can do with them. Yeah. What's the most sort of exciting product from Clayton Hops that you're looking forward to showing brewers that they might not have known that exists, like that some hop companies don't even provide?
I would say the hop oil.
Yep.
I know when I went there, that was something I was really excited about.
Yeah.
Obviously, there is a lot of different advanced products out there that claim to do different things, but the way this is made, it literally comes out as an oil, pure hop oil.
Yeah.
And you can just add it into your beer.
Yeah.
Whereas some of those other products need to be heated up or dosed in certain ways.
Yeah.
And you're getting different things out of it. This one is literally, just a tank addition.
Yep.
And you're putting pure hop oil into your beer, which is what you're trying to extract from a pellet anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's really cool. We're also doing CO2 extracted cryo pellets.
Yep.
Yeah. So at the processing facility, obviously do T90s, that's your standard pellet.
Yeah, yep.
Then the cryo pellets, which have sort of taken off with the US varieties.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, they're the only hop company in the Southern Hemisphere that are doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
because it wouldn't have been a cheap bit of kit to put in.
No. No. Yeah, they've got that on the oil facility.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
All that processing yourself.
And you obviously will give feedback back to the guys. Like, where do you sort of say, oh, hey, brewers are asking for this. Is there anything like that coming down the line? Because, like, a lot of people know by now, but some people might not. Like, even new hop varieties can take 10, 15 years before they even see the light of day commercially.
Exactly. Yeah.
How hard is that to know, like if you looked at hospitality and brewing 15 years ago, it was a way different landscape. So how are hop farms supposed to be able to look to that future of or are they guiding the brewers? They're like going, no, this is where we're taking our hops. Like,
yeah, I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
A lot of those breeding programs have been around for years and years. Like the other one in Australia first started, they were trying to grow alpha, the bitterness in beer, and they date back to the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
So a lot of those varieties got parked.
Yeah.
So they were in the library. But now they've realised that they've got a lot of flavour potential. So they bring them back because that's what brewers are looking for now, the flavour. And the plant and food has really been like 30 or 40 years as well.
Yep.
So they've actually been cultivating and crossing hops and growing them for that period of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously with the, I guess, explosion of craft beer, first in America and then trickling down to like other sort of parts of the world, all those hops, and there's been a massive shift in the way hops are being grown for flavour. So hops around the world have sort of, and you need a lot more flavour hops than you do bittering hops. Yeah. So for hop growers, it's good.
The travel that you're going to be doing, like you're going to be going and seeing like a lot of people. Are you looking forward to seeing what people can do with hops that you might not have even thought of as well? Or like every now and again, when you just come across a beer and you just taste it, or you open a can and it's punching straight out. Like how'd you do that? Like, are you still learning?
Oh, 100%. Like, even like up until finished brewing, you're always learning something. There's always something new pops up in the brewery, or some new ingredient, some new beer style, or a way to make a new beer style. Like even talking to Matt at Moffat Beach, he was telling me how many, like the rate of hops he puts in his IPA. I was like, oh, Jesus, no wonder that's a good beer. He was saying they had a meeting with the accountant who wasn't very happy with him. They're like, can you make some beers that don't cost quite as much in raw material? And like, well, no, this is our beers.
Is the accountant Shaz? Because normally it's Shaz telling him to hold up, mate.
But that sort of thing, going around and seeing these awesome brewers.
Yeah.
I already obviously knew him and made a beer with him, but he probably didn't
brew day is different,
disclose as much information. Was, I guess, a rival brewery in a way. Yeah.
But
that's definitely part of the fun. Getting around all the brewers.
And so if people want to get in touch with you now, if they're interested in Clayton Hops and want to see what you're doing, how do they get in touch with you?
Probably either email or
He answers 35%.
Now I'm actually having to respond all these. It'll be up at least 50.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's mate, thanks for the chat today.
Yeah, no worries.
And good luck, and gonna miss you up this area of the world.
We'll be up here, I reckon, every 2 or 3 months.
Yeah,
so either doing a collab beer or whatever it may be. Trying to sell hops.
Yeah.
So I definitely won't be a stranger. I'll pop in and see all my brewing mates.
Still come up for some judging and
involved in that sort of stuff.
Yeah, nice. No, mate, that's awesome, and we'll stick your email in the podcast as well, so that people can get in touch with you. And that's great.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Thanks for having me.
No worries, man.
Been talking about it for a while.
100%. It's so long. And time was a necessity.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.